Hello there, you're listening to the Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week, well, I'm thinking about things for Season 5 of the podcast. I already have a great lineup of guests through March, but I'm thinking of changing things up a little bit, but need feedback from you about my intros and outros. I mean, I spend the majority of my intros talking about myself. Sure, I talk about brands like Traeger, who happen to make the best grills on the planet, and I talk about sponsors like Stanley, Peter Glenn, 10 Barrel, and Cole Headwear, and I'm going to keep doing that. But I also spew a bunch of my opinions on the virus, the divisiveness in our country. I talk about Karens every once in a while, and again, talk a whole bunch about myself. And while I'm fine with that, I think I can do it better. I can talk about these same things and more with other people. What I'm trying to say is that I'm thinking about bringing a co-host into the mix. You know, a person to shoot the shit with in the beginning at the end of the show, recap some highlights of the interviews. I mean, I'd still handle all the interviews, but it could shake things up a bit and make them a lot more fun, or they could totally suck. But this is all a thought that's coming into my head pretty much right now, and I may as well throw it out to you. So please let me know if you think I should test out some co-hosts to spice things up. You can do that by emailing me at mike@thepowellmovement.com. If this does happen, I doubt it'll happen anytime soon because you just don't rush into these kind of things. Just like you don't rush into new sponsors that you've never heard of before. And I had never heard of Glade Optics before. I'm not sure if I had even seen them. But when Kurt, the owner, reached out and wanted to work with the show, I mentioned to him that I hadn't heard of the brand. And he sent me a bunch of awesome reviews from Free Skier, Blister Review, Outside Magazine, Backcountry Magazine, Ski Magazine, and a whole bunch more. They are legit. And while I didn't have an eyewear sponsor and I was open to something new, I still had to try them first to make sure they were as good as advertised. And they had to have an offer for you, the listener. They had to give a deal on goggles if I liked them. So I got my pair of mag flights last week and I'm stoked on them. They're everything my $300 goggles are in terms of performance. And after one day of Northwest snow and socked-in conditions, the main difference was the additional lens was much easier to change thanks to the Burley magnets. And they cost a third of the price of my old pair of goggles. So I'm glad they're on board, and in their ad there's a deal for you. And you know who else has deals in their ads? Stanley and Cole Headwear. And if you ski or snowboard, you're going to need some of the gear that they have, and the codes in their ads will save you some loot. They support me, and so does Peter Glenn Ski and Sports and the 10 Barrel Brewery. At this point, I want to ask you to subscribe and rate or review me wherever you listen to the show, and buckle up for part 2 with Danny Davis.
Yo, Mike.
How's it going, man?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. You project free at the moment?
Project free, man. Whatever projects are still open on the house are probably going to just be that way for the rest of winter.
Snowboarding starts like next week?
It started a couple days ago for me. We got some really small storms. I've been going and just doing some gauging on snow depth, but I've been splitboarding the last few days. So it's been really nice getting up in the mornings while it's still really cold and getting out in the mountains before it warms up too much. Yeah, it's been fun, man. I love this time of year, getting out by myself and just riding roads and things like that are safe, but just kind of more just like snow gauging, trying to figure out where we're going to go film.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a different mindset that you had from where we're going to pick up from, because when we talked last time, we had established you were in a contest mindset, and I would think in the early season, it was about getting rotations and figuring out what your run was going to be. That was about 2005 we were talking about, when Frends was starting and you were going to like 20 different events a year, and I think you're at Stratton Mountain School. And one thing I didn't ask you back then is like, when you go to a school like that and you travel a shit ton and all your other friends that you grew up with are doing like homecoming, prom, high school team sports in a totally different world. Looking back on it now, do you ever feel like you missed out on something that most kids get?
Hell no. I mean, no way, man. You know, SMS is really rad because, you know, all those kids are still doing those things. I went to prom. I went to prom at SMS, and we did school pranks when we were seniors. Like, I got to do all the fun stuff, and I think that's kind of one of the things I think that when I went to a boarding school, you know, everyone's just like, oh my God, you get to go to school for snowboarding. And it was like, Yeah, but we still go to school and we have a school life, and it was still high school, man. I got to still be a punk and probably was rude to teachers and all kinds of that stuff. But the one thing I did miss big time was just the sports and all the homies that I had back in Michigan from sports and doing the things in Michigan. I feel like I sort of missed out on a lot of doing things with my really good friends in Michigan. And I had a friend who passed away, one of my best friends growing up, and I just felt like I missed a lot of time with him. And that's the only thing that I really felt that I missed out of my young high school years was just really the kids that I really grew up with from 6, 7 years old all the way till I was 15, 16. I haven't gotten to spend as much time with them, and the snowboarding really ate into that. But gladly sacrificed it, and I still try to catch up with all those guys, try to get home once a year, but just really not seeing the Michigan folk is really what I think I missed out on, and I miss all those guys, and I really enjoy my time with them.
Well, while you miss out on all the Michigan folk, what you don't miss out on is doing dumb shit and risk, because we left off last time you had gotten injured and you had realized that the big thing is like your quality of life could change, but it didn't. And how long before you're able to get yourself in a position after that injury to go out and snowboard again like Danny Davis?
Boy, I guess it was about a year. I'm going to say a year. It was kind of like a little bit of a don't snowboard for a long time, like 8 or 9, 10 months. And then I could kind of start like, go for a walk in the mountains. Like the doctor would be like, yeah, go out walking some snow. And by this point I was running on the treadmill and doing all this stuff and doing a lot of heart rate stuff, trying to like manage kind of where I'm at as a year had gone by. It was so long ago, man. It was 10 years ago. Well, 9 years ago. But I do recall being in Truckee at that point and kind of being in the gym and feeling like, all right, I'm jumping, I'm skating a little here and there. I remember seeing Toby Miller. He's a young snowboarder in kind of the half pipe circuit right now. But I remember just getting back into skateboarding, and I saw her at the skate park, and she was with Toby. He was at the skate park, and she was like, are you supposed to be back yet on your skateboard? And like, I do recall that time, and yeah, it was interesting, man. And then the bummer was I got right back into boarding, and we were being super careful. And, that next summer I ended up breaking my femur, which was a really frustrating injury. I remember that one being almost more frustrating than my back, because my back, I knew I had months, like 10 months before I was going to be snowboarding. So it was just like, I was swimming, I was doing all this different kind of rehab that I wasn't used to for my back. And the femur one just seemed like it took so long because, well, for one, I had to get 2 surgeries on that, but it set me back so much, and I felt like I should have been back quicker. And I think that's why that one felt like it took so long. But about a year before I was really boarding again after breaking my back and pelvis and all that.
When you say about a year, is that getting in the half pipe too? And are you competing again at that
point? Gosh, I'm trying to remember. So that would have been 2011.
I feel like you took a couple years off, but I'm not 100% on that.
Well, 2011, I think I didn't do much for events that year. I do recall that towards the summer I was riding a lot more, but I do recall that like February I was kind of like still just keeping it on the ground and stuff like that. So like I said, it was a long time ago. I kind of have a hard time remembering it, but now that I think back, that's kind of right when I started splitboarding, actually. I do remember talking to the doctor and him being like, look, man, you can go snowboarding, but just don't leave the ground. Like, let's just ease into this. Let your body warm up. We don't need any jarring movements. I do remember them saying, like, for quite some time, they didn't want a lot of jarring movements on the new metal and everything in my body. They wanted it to give it time to, like, my body to kind of adapt to it and stuff. So I don't think I was competing until that next year, to be honest.
And when you're not competing, given it's a long time ago and you might not remember, but is there a point where like you look and at one point people are just doing maybe 2 different doubles, and then you're hurt for a little while and you look and people are doing doubles 4 different ways, and you're like, holy shit, if I'm ever going to come back to this, I have to learn these tricks that I thought was crazy 3 years ago and now it's like normal?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, like the sport moves quickly. Like, my immediate answer is yes. But in the reality of the situation, the Olympics has many ways that it affects our industry. And one of them is the rate at which it progresses, I think. From my experience, every time an Olympic year is coming, that's when the sport speeds up on tricks. People want that next trick. They want to have maybe a trick they've named or some shit going into that season. Who knows? But everyone seems to learn new tricks to get ahead of the curve for that contest season. And so I got hurt in 2010. I knew that in 2014, I guess, I needed to have some new tricks because that's when people would be learning tricks. So I knew I had some time. And it's just the nature of our sport. It just seems to really rapidly progress in those Olympic years. And in between, people kind of stick to the runs they know how to do. They learn some tricks, but right before that Olympic run, man, that's when the sport kind of goes through this little progression bump.
That's crazy. And regardless of the year, there's always going to be a shit ton of risk. I mean, when we're talking about a 22-foot pipe or an 18-foot pipe, and you're riding the best pipes in the world, I would think you go really, really big on that first hit. The second one, if you land high up in the transition, is going to be huge as well. Like, how high out of the pipe are you getting?
I don't know. I think 10 to 15 feet is where we live at. Maybe in contest runs, you're pushing a little bit harder and trying to go a little bigger into that 15, 20-foot range. I mean, U.S. Open, I see people going 25. Some of the time I see Sean going pretty big. There's definitely some impact, going on there. But, the beauty of it is I feel bad for the slopestyle guys because no matter what contest you're at, their landings always seem flat.
Yeah.
And if you're riding a half pipe correctly, like if you watch people who are really good at edging, people like Ayumu, people like Scotty James, people like Sean, they really match the tranny well. They hardly even get impact. They chuck them and they catch that little bit of vert that a 22-foot or an 18-foot pipe has. But, I think the amount of height difference that you can get out of a 22 than an 18 is just, it's not even in comparison. You can just go so much bigger in the 22-foot pipes.
But we'll say on an 18-foot pipe, when you go big, you're out 35 feet off the ground. And there are a ton of bad outcomes that can happen. Some of them, like, I think about Jake Brown at the X Games. He's a skateboarder, not a snowboarder, but I think it's the most famous of getting pushed off the vert and landing in the flat bottom from 40 feet up. Has that ever happened to you where you either get pushed or blown and you're going straight to flat?
Yeah, definitely. And the one that really sucks is when you go like 15, 20 feet out, you deck, and then that bounces you also to the flat bottom. So you get a nice 20-foot air to the deck to dead flat, and then you bounce off and down another 18 or 22 feet to the flat bottom. Yeah, that sucks. I mean, Jake Brown's, though, that's just a different world, the wood and everything. We're dealing with ice a lot of the time. So, there's that factor. But yeah, dude, it's gnarly. It's some big air.
For you, I mean, the deck that you had where you kind of bounced at the end in maybe 2017 or whatever, it was like you're on your run for the Olympic team, and that pretty much takes you out and probably almost ends your competitive career. Take us through that one.
Yeah, that sucked. I mean, that was just annoying. I put that blame on me. Like, in hindsight, that contest, I had feelings, I think a lot of riders that were at that contest in Mammoth were feeling like the odds were just against us. And personally, just having done so many contests and so many Olympic qualifiers, in hindsight, I really wish we all would have just said, I don't want to ride, or at least at the very least, I just wish I would have been like, you know what, I'm good. This half pipe really sucks. It's not a competitive level half pipe. It hardly had snowed in Mammoth. We were all trying to figure this really weird half pipe out. One wall was bigger than the other. It was janky and weird weather. And we didn't get to ride that much that week. The whole kind of practice got pretty much canceled for a few days. And then we were busting, I think, a couple contests out in one weekend, and it ended up being like one night and one the next day. But yeah, I just wish I wouldn't even have ridden. I didn't like that half pipe. Or at that fact, if I was going to ride, I wish I just would have taken it super easy and just did some fun runs, because I tried to throw tricks that I just wasn't landing in that half pipe very well. And quite frankly, was kind of just not into trying, because the half pipe just didn't really fit my style of riding at that time. So I was mad at myself for giving in and being like, I want to be on the Olympic team, so screw it, I'm going to chuck myself anyway. But it was a good lesson. Another good lesson I had to learn through snowboarding. And I tore my MCL on that one, and that put me down for a little while. But it was pretty awesome, actually, to take a step back and just look at snowboarding, look what the Olympics is, look what my friends are doing, and look what my friends are doing outside of the competition scene, and just like really seeing what I'm into, really seeing that. I just remember that point being like, contests were kind of pissing me off because I don't know, we were just kind of riding shitty pipes in shitty weather.
Is it scary at some point when you get broken off like that, like to come back and have to think about that? Like, I know I'm going to ride 4 shitty pipes next year. The weather's probably going to suck. And is it even worth me like having to compete and breaking myself off again and taking another year to get better?
Right. I would be lying if I said it's not the scary part of it, but it is that, exactly what you said, just kind of like, okay, am I really going to dedicate 3 months of my season? We snowboard kind of year round, but like, I really enjoy the American winter season, and I like being home in Tahoe and stuff and riding here and getting to ride POW. And do I want to dedicate my whole season to contests, and then, or 3 months of it at least? And then do I want to like take that risk factor, or do I want to take a risk factor in other areas and go ride snow that maybe my risk factor isn't so much like breaking myself in a half pipe contest as it is to like hitting POW kickers and riding lines and getting hurt doing that kind of thing. The risk factor is always there, but it just started to make me take a look at like what kind of snowboarding I really wanted to do and what I haven't mastered that I feel like I want to get into and start mastering stuff like that. I think I'll always ride half pipe. I think I'll always compete at certain levels, but that contest really bummed me out on just like, it just made me kind of take a little bit of what's going on in my snowboarding and what I'm really into.
But that's way later in the story. We're still at a point where in contests, I mean, there's risk, but there's a ton of reward. I mean, contest riders, especially in Olympic years, you can make a lot of money and you can have great sponsors that are going to pay you. And you've had that. You've had the Burtons of the world, Mountain Dew. Who else pays you to snowboard?
It's been a number of people over the years, but really the brands who've stuck with me and really kind of just been a part of my whole journey is Dragon and Mountain Dew and Burton. They've really, through all the injuries, I mean, from being really, just a poor decision maker when I was really young in 2010, hurt myself then, and then breaking my femur in 2012, and I've had like some hand injuries and some knee stuff, and those guys have just stuck by me so much. I've been very fortunate in that. And, contest riding, the risk versus reward thing is definitely cool. Like, you get paid money when you win, and that's great. And it's fun to make money. It's fun to like set yourself up, to try and set yourself up for life and to be able to enjoy snowboarding for the rest of your life. That's rad. But when you're kind of in that world of competitiveness, like the money thing isn't really on your mind. At least it isn't in mine. I know it's not in like Mark McMorris's or Scotty James. Like, you're more in the mindset that you're like at the top of your snowboarding discipline, and it's really hard for people to mess with that. And it's a pretty good feeling. And that's really what's driving it. You have the tricks that some other people don't, or you do your tricks a way that other people can't. And that's what makes you on the podium or at the top of it oftentimes. And when you're in that mode, and it's just like you're in it because you're getting to ride the way you want to ride, and you're getting rewarded for it, and you're doing the tricks you want to do, and it's fun, man. And the money thing is definitely a part of it, but it's definitely secondary to just the energy, the vibe, and the momentum that you're carrying at that point in your career.
Yeah, I would think the feeling of actually landing your run and getting into the finish corral and realizing that what you just did put you in first place, the emotion of that is just pure.
And that you'll be able to do it at the next event. I mean, I think that is really what forces the competitive riders to continue to do those runs. Like, I mean, at least when I would do well, or when I've done well over the years, like when I land my run and it puts me on top, I'm like, okay, that shit works. They like that because you really got to find what judges are into, and even contest to contest too. But you're like, all right, I know some of you fuckers are going to be at the next event. So I know what you liked here. You better like that at the next one. And like, you know that you kind of got a little bit of a thing going that's working. And I think that's what's exciting too in that moment.
Does anybody talk with the judges beforehand to see what they're looking for? Or is that kind of frowned upon?
Man, I heard Red Gerard talking about this in his bomb hole. And we used to just talk to the judges outside of whatever, like at the bar or whatever, before or after an event. But like, there's rider meetings and there's these things made at contests for you to go and talk with the judges. Do riders go there? Not that often. It's usually coaches,
team managers,
picking up bibs. It's generally not the riders. And that's changed over the years. Terrier, I think, was part of that back in his day. And I think there's always, Chaz Goldman, I remember at one point, was super into, helping steer the ship of riders on the contest circuit and what they want and being able to like answer at contests. In reality, every rider should go to those. And I have never been someone who goes to those. So I'm very hypocritical in this sense. But no, it doesn't exist that much. But it's what it takes. It takes the riders and the judges knowing what features are hard to hit. And when people are hitting those, because they're doing smaller tricks on that, it's because it's harder feature to hit. And, there's just different things that need to be said about courses that I think everyone needs to have a common understanding on at contests that doesn't always get communicated.
I think there's a strategy to contests. I mean, you got to go in there and make sure that you make finals. You can't go out and just throw your hardest tricks in the prelims or else you're showing your cards before you need to. And I think one of those things is, if you're looking for any advantage possible, making sure you're at those meetings and understanding what people want. It's just common sense. But sometimes common sense doesn't hit everyone. And I found in the athlete world.
Oh, yeah.
I won't say entitled, but it was like, dude, it's sunny. The contest is going to go on. I don't need to worry about it. The only reason I need to go to a meeting is if it was windy and I had to say that I didn't want to be part of the event.
Exactly. And I mean, that's kind of how it rolls. When shit starts hitting the fan and riders are like, what the fuck? Listen to us. It's like, oh, okay, now you show up.
Yeah.
And I was a part of that. I've been a part of that mindset. And yeah, it's not the way to approach it. And I think that having some leaders in our competitive world of snowboarding is important. So, that's always a tough topic. It's just snowboarding in general. We don't have one world tour. We have a bunch of different things that kind of try to be the main tour, and it's confusing and it's a shame sometimes.
It just seems like money gets put in different places and eventually it can't sustain itself. But it's like if everybody worked together and created one thing that wasn't one brand's event, it would probably be worthwhile for everyone. But that's just me speaking from the sidelines.
I think it's hard for us to say, even when I look at like something like the World Surf League or something in our realm that does a good job, they struggle too. And they've got crazy financial backing that's really hard to come by. Terrier tried so hard with TTR and God, it was a good go, and it doesn't exist now. And it's not to say that like it shouldn't exist. I mean, these things, we need to have one tour. We need to have snowboarders who run it, who make the decisions, who decide where the money goes, all that stuff, because I think too many times the federations get a hold of it, and those federations are part of skiing. And, a lot of the money that maybe the snowboarding's getting a lot of gets put wherever. Yeah. And then within the contest circuit, it's tough. Yeah. Everybody's kind of thinking about their own event, and there's no main tour that we're all focused on, which makes things like X Games and US Open and Dew Tour really stand out, and the Olympics. And then all other contests are sort of like, they're quiet, Grand Prix and stuff like that. You don't hear much about it.
Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break. And my first sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. If you haven't noticed, 10 Barrel supports so much in the world of ski, snowboard, and bike. But another cool thing about 10 Barrel is that they also do so much out-of-the-box fun shit, like giving away old Army vehicles filled with beer and so much more. I could go on and on about the antics, the Pray for Snow Winter Ale, and the Profuse Juice Hazy IPA that I've been drinking a ton of, or how they give back to protect our winners and support so many important athletes and causes, but I don't have enough time. To find out more, head on over to 10barrel.com and you'll get all that info. And next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel. My next sponsor is Glade Optics. Headquartered in Colorado, they are the independent choice for goggles. Did you know that 9 out of 10 of the top brands in the goggle category are owned by parent companies? They are out to take your money and give it back to shareholders. Not Glade. Their goggles have the fit, function, and lens of a $300 corporate goggle without the big price tag. To me, they check the most important boxes. They look really good, and I tried them on a few different helmets, and they don't fog. From photochromatic lenses to magnetic interchange systems to storm lenses, it's definitely worth checking out Glade. It all comes at pricing that you aren't going to believe, and I'm going to get you 10% off that pricing. What you need to do is head on over to shopglade.com, pick out some goggles, and enter the code TPM10. That's all one word, all caps, and the number 10 to get that deal. My final sponsor in this break is Stanley, and they pretty much invented the category of containers that keep things hot and cold. And there is no other product on the market that comes close to doing this as well as what Stanley does. If you've owned a Stanley, you still have it and know exactly what I'm talking about. And this year, if you're a skier or a snowboarder and you're going to do the mountain right, you're going to have soups, coffee, hot chocolate, and you're going to keep that all in the car. And most likely, you don't have all the containers you're going to need to keep that stuff hot or cold. The good thing is, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to save 30% when you're buying the amazing products from Stanley. And all you need to do is to head on over to stanley-pmi.com, go shopping, enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you'll get the deal and save 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. And speaking of you and the financial reward, because that's really where I was trying to go with it, although we were talking about rules and contests, which we really don't need to worry about anymore. But you have a skate park at your house. You said that you poured while your fiance was out of town, which is pretty funny. She shows up to that. Do you own any other properties?
I do. And I'm always looking. I bought a piece of land in Utah. My parents live in Utah now. And I bought a piece of land on Powder Mountain.
Oh, nice.
And I really thought that was like pretty sweet, like retirement mountain, and that my folks might be able to enjoy it. And my brother, they all live in Salt Lake City. And I just thought, since I'm in driving distance of that, I thought it'd be a rad spot to have in the future. So we haven't done anything with that. It's just a naked plot sitting there. But I'm always looking, man. I really would like to buy a backcountry hut and that kind of thing. But nope, I just own this house and one other little chunk of land as of right now.
And then you put some money, I think, into Frends. And did that money pay off at all? Did you get any money back on the Frends investment?
No, sir. Gonzo.
And that whole deal, there was a rise and fall. I talked to Kier about it. And
yeah, I listened to that one. That was great. It's always good to for me to get some info too when I listen on something like that. It was an interesting one to listen to for me.
And from your perspective, because he was the guy that took it and made it a women's headphones brand, but you were the guy that started the company with a bunch of friends and was creating this snowboard brand that I won't call it a men's snowboard brand, but snowboarding is like so many dudes. It was like 90% of the people that were going to buy them were going to be guys. And what happens in your head when you see or you hear that your company's totally changed the direction? Do you laugh? I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, there was a certain amount of humor in it simply because shit was so messed up by that point with Frends. In our opinion, we were so out of the bubble. We were so out of even making any decisions there. And to us, in the beginning, it was like, okay, guys, we're going to make headphones, and getting us to answer emails and do things was like a challenge.
It's like getting you to go to an athlete meeting.
Yeah, like it was just like, you guys. So, a few of us did. Kevin was good at it. I was okay at it. Jack wasn't so good at that point. But then people got better as we got older. But once our feedback started to kind of matter less, then our interest started to matter less. And we just kind of were like, okay, Frends is ours. It's just our crew and we make headphones, but who really cares, right? And then what those guys were doing with the actual product, let's say, it didn't really matter to us, and that money, that ship had sailed. The company was doing so bad, so poorly, and Kier and them asked all of us to put more money in, and I just wasn't down. Some of the boys were, and I kind of pleaded them to not put money in. But once that point happened where my money was gone and I had no say in the company and I realized kind of where we were at, I just stopped really caring about it. But then we all met up for like this company meeting in Vegas. And that's where Kier dropped the bomb on us that it was going to be a women's only headphone brand. And there was humor in it. We were just like, and they explained it to us like it was all an effort to save the company, to save what they could and make money where they could. So it was kind of like, all right, but can we still like make some headphones for us, like some men's headphones? They're like, yeah. I'm sure we could, but right now we're not gonna market or make any men's headphones. We were just like, well, there's one more thing that we just don't really have a clue on with this brand. And that was kind of the icing on the cake. I was just kind of like, all right, so we're never getting our money back. You guys are making women's headphones, and we just had no involvement in it. So it was just kind of, that was the, like I said, the icing on the cake.
No, I can see that, not wanting to be a part of that at that point.
And it just didn't really matter. Those guys were so deep. Kier and them had put so much work in that it's not like we could say like, well, hey, come on. It was like, dude, this is your guys' thing. Whatever you want to do,
Yeah. And so you've got other things to check off the list being a pro snowboarder. One of the most important things, other than being able to pay your bills by snowboarding, is having a pro model. I think that's the coolest tangible item that you can have. And with yours, your Easy Living series, it's pretty amazing because when you come up with the idea for a pro model, or Burton's like, hey, we're thinking about giving you a pro model, you like, nah, I think I want a series. I want like 3 boards instead of 1. Or how does that conversation come up?
Over time, the conversations have always been different. Like, we had Easy Living, and then Easy Living turned into like the Deep Thinkers and Free Thinkers. And I ride so many boards, and like pro model is such a interesting thing in snowboarding because like, I think having a pro model was so rad, like in the past, like Mickey Albin pro model or Terrier's boards or Giggy. But, like I never had any boards actually had my name on them. I would work on the board and it was kind of like understood that I worked on it. But, actually my first pro model ever with my name on it was the Gons one we did with Mark Gonzalez. And I think he was so in that skateboard mentality that when he did a pro model with someone, he was doing it for a rider, So it was like when he signed it, he wrote Gons and Danny. And that was actually the first pro model I think I actually had my name on. But when Burton comes to me and has made boards, it's been like, what kind of board do we want to make? Because people don't want to ride the board that I'm riding in the pipe. It's a really basic, boring board.
Yep.
When we make boards specifically for pipe, they have like minimal side cut and they're stiff and they're just not fun on the mountain. They're made for like one purpose. And I rode those boards for a long time. So like the Easy Living, like back when we were making those, I was riding Banana in the half pipe, and Easy Living would come in camber and Flying V.
Yep.
And then we went to like all camber with the Easy Living. So every year it was just kind of like an evolution. And when we got to Free Thinker and Deep Thinker, we wanted to replace Easy Living, and there was a spot in the board line where I felt like there needed to be like a freestyle directional board, a board that went good backwards but looked really directional, with a different nose and tail design. So that's where I wanted that, but I wanted us to keep that freestyle completely park board too, because Easy Living was a lot of people's park boards. So then we were like, all right, we'll make a little quiver, and you got your park board and kind of your all mountain freestyle powder riding board too, all in this little mini quiver within Burton. So it always evolves, and I've ridden so many boards and I ride so many boards every season that like I wouldn't really know what name to put on one, but that is probably one of my favorite things about riding for Burton is we get to have input and get to design boards that are for us, even if they're not marketing it and selling it. Like, we're working on boards with those guys that are exactly what we want. And it's a really cool feeling to be able to be at that level with those guys.
Yeah, and it seems like they've been doing that forever. I had Dave Downing on recently, and he was talking about just developing the custom. And it's like they've always worked with their athletes to get the most out of them in product as well. And one thing with your pro models that's interesting, which definitely cuts into like your margin and everything, is your graphics. It's like you have the Grateful Dead, you have Led Zeppelin, and I would think this is based off your personality and all the things that Danny Davis loves. But when you come into like a meeting and they're like, so what are you thinking with the graphic series on this and where should we go? And you're like, I'm really feeling the Dead right now. And this is at a time when the Dead hadn't hoarded themselves out. This is like 2012. So there wasn't that much Dead shit going on.
Totally.
Is that a total hassle to make that happen? Just going through all like people, or are you not involved?
Man, I'm involved on the concept of the idea generally. And again, it's worked different every time. You know, when the Grateful Dead thing was kind of coming around, like they had maybe done like a first layer with a Grateful Dead graphic, right? And got it approved and got the rights. And I think we were like, shit, can we do that on the board? They're like, yeah, like the relationship we have with the Grateful Dead is awesome. We should ask them. I'm like, I would love to do like a Steely on a bass. And they're like, cool, like let's ask. And then it goes from there. And the same with Zeppelin, or like, I remember pulling up like some Jimi Hendrix pictures and being like, can we just run like a big ass photo of Jimi Hendrix on the bass? And they're like, we'll go see. And, you know, it's really like, that's kind of the same with the overall design of the boards, is just the people at Burton. They're fucking rad. And they're the ones who get it done. You know, when it comes to like making boards, like JG and Doyle over at Burton, and some of the board makers like Thunder and Grant, those guys are like some of the best board makers ever. And we look good because they work so hard and they're so fucking good at their jobs. You know, like the relationship with the Grateful Dead, I have hardly any. But somebody at Burton, they went and they made that relationship and they did it, and they made it possible for us to have a Steely on the bass or a 13-point bolt. But like, I have sparked the ideas, and then these people go and make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was amazing because I was at K2 and we worked with the Rolling Stones, and we had to pay something like, I want to say $75 a ski or something like that just to be able to use their graphics. But they're a limited edition, and we just pumped up the price and everything was fine.
Yeah, I mean, times are different, you know, musically. I think a lot of bands are trying anyway to make money, especially right now. But yeah, it was funny that was, like you said, like before the Dead was really whoring themselves out on collaborations and stuff. Yeah, I agree. But I've always been a big Dead, and, you know, Jake and a lot of people at Burton, I mean, in Vermont in general, a lot of big Dead fans. So that one was kind of like a natural fit. I think when that worked out in the licensing department, it was like a real home run for the brand because so many people love the Dead.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where some people aren't even going to ride those boards. They're going to put them on their wall because they love the Dead so much. And that's anything the Dead does. People do that with their stuff. But I guess playing off of that, one thing we haven't touched on is the image you've built over the years. And right now, from the pictures I've seen, it seems like you're going from a metamorphosis of like clean-cut dude that is going to go to who knows what. But looking attitude-wise, I've seen over the years, you cultivated a look that was like, you were the dude in the Grateful Dead parking lot making sure his buddies were all having a good time. And when did like the 70s podhead Traveling Dan look start?
I guess 1988, June 22nd, when I was born.
Well, I was going to say, is there maybe even a pre-Traveling Dan? Was there a hip-hop Traveling Dan like in Detroit, or was it always like the 70s kind of guy?
You know, I grew up driving in the car with my dad. We spent a lot of time in the car going to play sports, outdoor things, go up north, go snowboard and whatever. And we listened to a ton of classic rock growing up, tons. And country. And, you know, where I hung out in Michigan is a very country kind of vibe, but we were into music, man. Like, we loved music. We played piano. My mom has always been a piano player. My brother as well. My brother was in bands and stuff. He's much more musical than myself. He's a much better musician than me. But that was just something we all enjoyed as a family, was music, and always has been. But not that my parents were like Deadheads or anything like that at all. Not even close. I think my dad was super into like maybe even like some soul and disco era kind of stuff, like Tower of Power and stuff like that. But we listened to a ton of music. Like, and I remember listening to like Hootie and the Blowfish too, you know, like a ton. So it was just growing up liking music. And then as I went to high school, you know, my friends would get their license when mini discs were just coming out, so we could make really good playlists and we could listen to music that wouldn't skip when you would snowboard. And we started making mini disc playlists and passing them around and taking them on the mountain with us and jamming. And then I got to SMS, and my first roommate, Mike Farnham, was really into the Dead and really into Fish, and he introduced me to a lot of that kind of music, jam band stuff. And you know, we would gel on Zeppelin and all that stuff too, as I was aware of that. But, he really like got me into like the Dead and stuff. And then Nick Russell, my roommate now, also went to school with me, and he rides for Jones Snowboards. Nick got me into hip hop, like a lot of it. Like him and Farnham really got me into hip hop. They got me listening to a ton of Biggie and a ton of like Tupac at that point in our high school. So I would get all these music realms from everywhere. But I think what was rad about kind of like the Dead and all that stuff was more just like the jam of it, the music of it, really being into like finding different versions of different songs. I think that's where I started to really dive into like a lot of bands too. I mean, even like, Fleetwood Mac has all these like older albums, and, getting into the bluesy Fleetwood Mac and stuff. Like that area of music is just so deep. You find all these rad versions, these early versions, live versions, all this stuff. And I think that's how I really went down that path, was just once I got so deep into those songs. And I had like a Dylan phase. I had a Neil Young phase. I remember when Jack Matrani was going through his John Lennon phase, and that kind of like, we all loved the Beatles, and like, yeah, it's just like anybody else, man. Normal human going through finding music that we hadn't heard.
Okay. Back to the snow, you get to the 2014 X Games, and while in your career I think you've done well at Dew Tours, you haven't done well at the X Games. And is there any reason for that, or is there extra pressure on you at the X Games, or is it just situational, it just happens?
I don't know. Yeah, it was kind of a barrier there for a while for me at X Games. And I remember just not doing well for years. But, actually my first X Games ever, I was an alternate for pipe, I think. And I think I ended up getting in. But before pipe, they had an opening in slope. And I think I got 5th or 6th in slope.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I made finals in my first X Games in slopestyle. And that was a riot. Like I was with Mark Frank Montoya, and like I was so hyped on that, and just like being in the slope scene was like, I was all about slope style, but I only got in for pipe, or was an alternate for pipe, but then they needed an alternate for slope. So that was a real treat, but there was definitely a barrier there for a while. I just didn't do well. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm from Michigan. I grew up riding at night almost every day. I mean, we probably rode more at night than in the daytime, to be honest, growing up. But I don't like riding the nighttime icy pipe. It's not my strong point. It's not as fun for me. When a pipe's slushy or soft or like daytime, like it's fun. I like that softness. I like that like grippy snow. When it's icy and slippery and cold and 8 o'clock at night, I'm not as dialed in as a snowboarder, and it's just not as fun on the ice. So I think I don't perform super well in the nighttime events.
And does it ever get to the point where you're standing up top and they're like, all right, Danny, you're up in 5 seconds, and then you have to wait like 8 minutes for TV commercials and bullshit to go on?
Every contest.
And then it's just like, turn it on right then.
Yeah, that's every contest, though. You get used to that because it happens at every event. And when you get all strapped in, not to like click your bindings down like all the way, because you're going to have to unclick them because they're going to be like, hey, Danny, we're a minute and a half out. Sorry, man. But I get that world of production and making a TV show and stuff. So I'm cool. I play along with it. I listen to music when I do contests, so it's all good. It gives me a little more time to get in my zone, to be honest. I love when they try and freeze you at the top. I'm like, sweet. Now I just don't have to talk to anybody. I can just like get in my zone.
Now it's time for me to take another sponsor break. And next up is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. If you don't know Peter Glenn, well, they started in Vermont over 60 years ago when retail was king. And they've been the brand that has helped build skiing and snowboarding on the East Coast forever. They still have that retail element, but now everyone can shop at Peter Glenn because they also play against the big internet brands too. And guess what? They'll price match the big guys, offer free shipping on orders over $49, and have great deals on the best brands. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Cole Headwear. And you know what everyone needs this winter? A beanie. And a lot of times you get a beanie and it doesn't have the right fit and you end up looking stupid. That has happened to me way too often in life. Until I found Cole Headwear. I've been wearing their beanies at least 10 years before I started this podcast because I knew when I bought one, it would look right on my head. And my shit always looks fresh because I wear Cole. That goes for hats too, but it's winter, so we're talking beanies. And I'm going to save you 15% off your entire Cole order. When you head on over to ColeHeadwear.com, go shopping, Enter the code POWEL, the number 15. It's all one word, no caps or spaces, and you will get that 15% off. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. And at that contest, your first run doesn't go as planned, but you lay down one on your second run. And when you don't land a run, maybe your first or second, I mean, can you feel the pressure on your shoulders? Are you one of those dudes that like it just all builds up into your head? Because you seem like you're a laid back dude. And I think when you talk about like classic rock, chilling, traveling, Dan, it makes me think that you're not like the hyper competitive person that I know you have to be a little bit, I would think, to do as well as you've done.
I've always been pretty competitive. I think my fiance, any of my friends will be like, oh yeah, Danny's competitive. But I just don't think it gets to my head as easy. I think a lot of people do struggle with getting pressure built. But for me, I'm like anybody else. If I fall the first run, you do have extra pressure added. You are like, all right, last run, I got to make this all count. That is there every time you leave it to the last run. That's never going to disappear. But that moment is kind of fun too, I'll be honest. And the payoff mentally for yourself of like, okay, this is it. 6 hits, 5 hits, you got this. And you actually lace it and it works out really well. Like we were talking about the payoff, like, yeah, the money and all that stuff's rad, but like that where you kind of give yourself this little test where you're like, okay, you got this one run, man. Like, let's do this. And you do it. It's really cool feeling. And so you know that lives at the other end if you do put it down. So it's kind of when you're in that moment before you drop, there is a lot going through your head. But the snowboarding, luckily for me, and I think for many people, takes over. You aren't thinking much. Once I drop in and kind of like hit that first wall, like really the focus is so just laser beam that your brain's not really doing much.
You become Danny again at the end once you get to the corral.
Yeah, your body goes on autopilot of like trying to get wicked. And it's really fun. You know, snowboarding is fun, luckily. You know, I'm not running a 100-meter race where it just takes like true just power and strength. I'm tweaking and I'm spinning and I'm getting to add a little bit of style to the landings if the tricks are going smooth and you're getting to put them down the way you want to. Like, it's fun, man. And to be in that situation is cool. It's fun. It's the reason I've done it for so long. But, you know, that first, I can't remember if it was my first one, but I think I had just come home from Japan, the first X Games I ever won. And I had like been in Japan just riding POW for a few weeks, if I remember correctly.
So you're just like in the right headspace when you get there?
Yeah. It was just kind of like, I got like my full powder fill out and we were just getting to the end of January, you know, like I was on a high. That was really rad. Actually, I think the first one I won maybe was the 2014. That was right before the Olympics.
Yeah, it was the Olympic year.
Yeah, okay. So that one was different. That was definitely been contest to contest to contest. And by the time I got to there, I was probably just like, well, another contest. Here we go.
But I would think that's a big one for you because you've never won the X Games and you win it.
Yep.
And it's like coming back from all the shit you came back from 4 years before. And to stand on top of the X Games and be like, I won pretty much my Olympics when I was a kid before the Olympics were a thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you think back to that, but I would think it's like the full circle of like, I'm finally back to where I belong.
I don't think about it, but it's cool to have someone remind me to dwell on it a little bit. And it was rad. It actually, and you know, at the moment in time, it more just felt like, what did I do to get so lucky? Like everything's just working out right now. Like I'm riding well. I'm consistent. I'm not usually a consistent rider. I just was like feeling so lucky, feeling so thankful. And I don't even remember what my mindset was like, but I do remember just being like taking it kind of contest by contest and being like, okay, that was cool. I got this result. Okay. Ooh, I need that result. Okay. Like hopefully I can get a result like that. And when you're doing the Olympic thing, it's really about what other people are doing too. You know, I remember like Ben Ferg winning some early contests in the last one. And it was like, boom, he pretty much locked his position on the team right away. So boom, there's only like 3 spots left now.
Yep.
Now you're constantly playing this game. So I think in 2014, I was just playing it so contest by contest. When we got to the X Games, we kind of knew, I think, if I was going to the Olympics, I knew I was going. So I was like, well, hey, I'm going to the Olympics. That's always been something I wanted to try. So this is great. I'm going. And here we are at X Games. And if I can do well here, this will be great. But if I don't, we're going to the Olympics. This is cool.
And making the team and being a dude who once had one of your signature series, I won't call it a pro model because I don't think it had your name on it, so it's probably not a signature series either. But it had a image of a dude that looked like he was smoking a spliff on the back. I'm going to assume that weed has been in your life at some point. And when you go to these contests that are Olympic-based or FIS-based, there is drug tests. And do you have to change your lifestyle just to do these contests? And do a lot of people have to?
I don't think so. I mean, I think like everything in moderation, right? Or whatever. I think if you're into that at that point of your career, you're about the snowboarding. So the fact that you can't really smoke weed and snowboard and you got to not smoke weed for 6 months, whatever it is, it's just not really a stress. Maybe it's a bummer for some people that are super into it and they got to take these breaks. But like, honestly, you're trying to go to the Olympics or you're trying to do bigger things. Like that shit's always going to be there. Booze is always going to be there. Like it's really a good lesson in just buckling down and being focused, I think, for a lot of us when we get to that point. But does it have to change much? These days, I don't think it does. I mean, I think you can have so much in your system legally now with the IOC and everything, with the USADA drug testing, that I think a lot of the kids smoke up until a week before or whatever. But when I was younger, that was not the case. We didn't really roll like that. We were not a part of smoking weed.
You could get in big trouble. You could become a national story that way.
Yeah, and you don't want that kind of press. And more so, whether it's alcohol, whether it's anything, man, you just don't want anything getting in the way of your snowboarding. I think that's how you blow it, whether it's relationships, whether it's drugs and alcohol. I've learned a lot of this stuff by making mistakes, but don't let things come in between whatever you're, whether it's snowboarding or anything else either. Just whatever you're trying to do. If your goal is to reach this certain point, you can't let anything get in the way. And when you do, that's when you can find the faults in yourself and make yourself better.
And the funny thing is, you don't want anything to get in your way because you're going to the Olympics, competing on the biggest stage in the entire world. And your mind, body, and soul, not that it needs to be perfect, but it needs to have no substances in it that'll keep you from competing. But you would expect that the organizers of these events would make sure that their events were pristine and perfect as well. But at that Olympics, you take 10th place. And while it'd be very easy for me to say the conditions were awful, it was a terrible half pipe, and every single athlete was cheated, do you feel that way?
I don't, man. If that's the case, then that's every contest. Then every contest the athlete is cheated or whatever. Because, man, they could have done a better job. Yes, maybe doing it on a different day would have been better. But the fact of the matter is, at every contest, snowboarding is not the number one goal. Making a TV show is the number one goal. And then maybe snowboarding comes second or third to that. But the thing is, everybody has the same half pipe, though, at every contest, right? So some people rode a lot better than others that day and rode that chunky, funky, slushy half pipe. But honestly, I was having fun in that half pipe. It was weird. It was really soft, really sloppy, but it was fun. And I was riding well, and I had a rad trip. We rode so much good snow before we actually even rode half pipe. We got there, and Rusa Couture, or whatever it was called, has gondolas to like all these really rad little peaks throughout the range there. And we were riding epic snow, me and Greg Bratz. It was so much fun. But, that pipe, it was the same for everybody. And those guys crushed it in a really tough half pipe. So it was kind of impressive for them. And snowboarding, being on the world stage, is really a double-edged sword. And it was really rad to be on that stage. But you get just a little bit of a look inside to the shit show that is the Olympics, So it was kind of a really cool thing I got to check off the list, and I kind of feel like I never need to go again.
Right. And from there, I think for the next few years, it's all about contests. You won the X Games again in 2015, but you aren't getting any younger. And we talked about you breaking yourself off in 2017. Before I get out of the whole contest world, though, one thing I do want to ask, or at least I want to understand, is a story I heard about Simon Dumont, or I didn't really hear a full story, but was there an incident between you and the Dumonster at the European Open or somewhere in Europe at some point?
Monster.
I know, I coined that one.
Yeah, I do remember European X Games. It was like in teens, in France, teens.
Teen Airwaves?
It was really actually a pretty sweet contest in teens. But the weather rolled in, And there was a night where we all kind of hung out in the bar, and the snowboarders were having a conversation and the skiers were having a conversation, and each sitting separately, like a group of snowboarders and a group of skiers. It was a while ago. I don't really remember how we came to gathering together, but I think somebody said, "Hey, snowboarders, skiers, why are we separated? Like, let's all hang out together." So we were like, okay. And then they were like, "What are you guys talking about?" And we had just been talking about how, really that like a 360 or tricks weren't really cool and had style until they were done on a snowboard. I mean, like, people have been doing backflips on skis or 360s or like helicopters, I feel like they were called at one point.
Yeah, that's what they were known as.
But what wasn't cool until you did it sideways, until you were standing sideways. And, we were just saying that, and I still stand by this, that, I didn't write these rules. This is not me making shit up. It's just that skateboarding is cooler than rollerblading, as surfing is cooler than like water skiing.
Yeah.
Just as snowboarding is cooler than skiing. And it's like tricks weren't cool till they were done on like a board, and that's just the way it is. It's like, why is a rainbow made? It just happened. Like, like that shit just happens. So that's the way we were talking. And they got kind of upset that we were saying that like snowboarding's better than skiing and this and that. And we were kind of being jokeful and laughing. And I think Simon had just hurt himself that day or something. He had found out he did something, but he ended up getting really upset and like punching a hole in the wall or like punching a door and like hurting his hand. Then also that night, yeah, he got pretty upset with me, and we were kind of, not fighting by any means, but definitely there was some yelling and some angry people by the end of that night. It was very skiers against snowboarders, which was kind of fun.
Skiers versus snowboarders in Europe. What's going to happen next?
Yeah, it was cool. It was like straight out of a movie.
So we said that you had a really bad crash leading up to the 2018 games, and while you'll always compete, competition became much less of a focus. And where you started splitboarding years earlier, it seemed like you were starting to really become a backcountry or more of a mountaineer, man. You're getting after it. You're going all over the place. I mean, you pretty much go from that competitive realm to filming to just really becoming a mountain man. And in the world of snowboarding, I doubt you're going to make your money as contests anymore. But based on your image and the way that you're a marketable personality, you can be a pro for a long, long time. Is it going to be splitboarding and just putting together that film segment that's always eluded you, just the ultimate one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been something I've never really gotten to do, is take a full stab at dedicating an entire season to a video part. I'd love to dedicate a whole year to filming. I'd love to dedicate 2 years. I'd love to dedicate the rest of my life to just going out and getting photographs and film clips. But I do enjoy the contests, and I think I'll continue to do them maybe a little bit more, and they're fun. But I think where my heart lies right now is just riding good snow, really getting into it and learning about the mountains. I think there's so much I don't know, even from a snow safety standpoint, that I could be better at. And, when shit goes wrong in the backcountry, extracting people and things and just being ready for those bad moments. And two, just riding lines and stuff. Like, I ride a lot with Nick Russell, and, he's just been kind of going down this path since high school. And, he's my roommate now. He gets me out a ton, and we really enjoy getting out there. And I'm learning how to ride lines. I'm learning how to pick out cool lines, and then kind of going and finding our own jumps and things. And it's just more of an exploratory thing that I'm really having fun with. It's like following the storms. Where's the snow going to be? And when you nail it, you nailed it, and you've got great conditions, and you really feel like you know what the hell's going on. And just getting better at that, reading storms, knowing where to go in our area, knowing where to go throughout the country and the world, and really just scoring really good days. Because I think every snowboarder can say that they'd much rather be riding way steep POW than anything else on any given day. Whether there's a perfect half pipe sitting there or a perfect kicker or rail line, I think most people who know what the hell they're talking about would take the powder day. So I think it's just like, and two, like you were saying, my body is definitely at a point where it gets beat up from riding half pipe. Like a week straight of riding half pipe definitely beats it up a bit. And I can ride every day if I'm riding good snow. Like, my body doesn't get beat up. that way. And so it's just a quality of life and a quality of riding that I'm looking for. And I've been lucky to be supported by the brands that I ride for, and I hope they'll continue to. And I think there's a lot more to do, though. I want to film that video part. And, it's been fun riding with a lot of the young, riding a lot with Mick Morris is really fun because he's just so damn good and so progressive within the tricks of our sport that it's a real good fire under my ass to keep tricking and keep going and keep learning tricks.
Does it make you feel old riding with a dude like that?
Yeah, I'd say it makes me feel more old riding with Brock and Red, which is super fun. And I love riding with Brock, man. I just think that Brock Crouch, he is a really good snowboarder, and he's going to be a person to watch, I think, as his career unfolds, because I think he's into some cool shit, and he's a really talented kid. But those guys make me feel super young. Their trick selection and all that stuff and shit they throw off jumps, I'm just like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
So it's fun to ride with them and get that fire lit under me a little bit and keep tricking. So I love riding with the team that I have at Burton and stuff. And then the friends I have in between that. I'm really looking forward to the next few years, man.
Nice. Well, what I hope you're looking forward to right now is Inappropriate Questions, because we have another round of them for you.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Who we got it from? I bet I could almost guess the story like I did last time.
Well, this one's from Mason Aguirre.
Oh, boy.
He's got 3 questions for you. I'll go with the first one. Here we go.
Okay, this is my first question. It's not, hey, Danny, this is Mason.
Hey,
I guess
man.
it's not necessarily in the line of inappropriate, but I guess I just want to hear his take on this. How do you feel about snowboarders saying, quote unquote, they are pro when they haven't earned the clout or respect to be called as such? As an example, contest wins, video parts, industry acknowledgement. Ooh. Something that I see a lot on Instagram of dudes saying that they're pro, but they're not really on a Danny level or even in quite a recognition state, if you will. So I know how I feel about it. I want to hear what Danny feels about it. Maybe a little controversial. Maybe he doesn't or does want to touch on it. But yeah.
There we go.
I don't know. I don't see that much. That's funny that Mace sees that. Kids calling themselves pro. But, dude, if you got to do that, call yourself pro on social media to make yourself feel better and stand out to your friends or whatever, you know what? Go for it. I think the people who are claiming that they're pro and aren't pro know when the paychecks don't show up, that's for sure.
Do you look at pro as someone who can pay all their bills by snowboarding and doesn't have to work another job? That's how I look at it, and I'm just curious to how you look at it.
I mean, I think, let's say it this way, there's a big difference between a professional snowboarder and someone who's mastered snowboarding or someone who's
sponsored,
a really avid snowboarder. I mean, yeah, I think professional, let's put it in this realm, right? Let's say I'm a painter, right? I love to paint. I paint pictures of mountains. I'll paint your walls. I'll paint the outside of your house. But I've never gotten paid a dime to do it. I do it all the time, though. And I'm kind of in the industry, I know what paint to use. But I've never received a dime. And I've painted my friends' houses and stuff, too. But no one ever pays me. Could I call myself a professional painter?
No.
Well, then, yeah. So, I think on the professional level, you are getting money. But I think it's hard these days because not a lot of brands are paying. So I think there are people who are pro who aren't maybe making a ton of money. And I think there's people who are professional by the standard of how good they are. I think one person I would throw out there is someone like Mason or Luke. They are professional snowboarders. It's not like they were professionals. Those guys, their skill level, they might not be paying their bills anymore, but their skill level is there as a professional. So I think that's a hard question, but I think the people who are calling themselves pro are maybe close to being pro, so just let them have it.
And you're not seeing the Instagram pro so much, it sounds like.
I know. I don't see that often. I wonder who he's talking about.
All right, I will go with question number 2.
Okay, question number 2. Danny, I know that you've gone on some long backcountry missions, Denali, Antarctica. So my question is, what's the longest you've gone without a shower on one of these trips?
Oh, man, I thought we were going to get way more rugged than that. Because, when I came back from Bolivia, the first question that Jake Burton had for me was how do you masturbate out there when you're sharing a tent with somebody?
Which is a very valid question.
It's a very valid question. But shower, I think 21 days was Denali.
That would keep you pretty ripe. Well, I guess
it's right, but you're kind of not smelling much by that point. Like day 4, I think is gnarly because like you're just getting used to all the crazy smells, and by day 20, like you just don't smell anything anymore. Anything that smells bad just doesn't hit you like it used to.
All right, we will go with his final inappropriate question.
Okay.
My final inappropriate question involves Danny's personal life. Danny, I want to know, what took you so long to propose to Haley?
How long did you string her out for?
Gosh, she's a trooper. It's been about 11 years.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah, she's amazing. She stood by you the whole time. How many times did she ask you or infer that you guys should maybe get married?
It's been a topic. Like, her family's been giving me a hard time about it forever, and my parents have been asking me, and really it just was a matter of time, and just like, when life's moving so fast, sometimes you procrastinate on things, I guess, and that was one of the fields that I procrastinated in. And at one point in my life, I was like, man, we are together. Like, why does a ring change things and anything like that? But that whole process of like getting a ring and trying to find a diamond and this and that and making a ring was really rad. And I understand the process now. I know why it does matter. And I kind of get that. You get like a new level of appreciation for it when you've gone through it, because they are expensive and they are like totally a token of commitment. So it's pretty cool. I get it now.
Well, I also think you were probably trying to make it that much more special for her because she had to wait 11 years. And if you have to wait that long, it's so exciting.
Yeah, it is. And it's a rad ring. And then she's totally been the rock behind a lot of my snowboarding, and just like she's compromised a lot of times when I haven't. She's a rad lady, man. I'm super, super lucky. I can't believe it took me that long. But thanks for the question, man. He's throwing me under the fucking bus.
Well, that's what inappropriate questions are kind of all about.
Yeah, I like that.
I thank you for answering them, and thank you for your time, man. Your career's been a refreshing one. Like, you've been killing contests, but you don't look like one of those dudes that's like a trained killer by any means. Like, you look like the laid back, like I said, Grateful Dead parking lot guy who happens to beat everybody in the half pipe, or a lot of people in the half pipe. And it's been cool to watch your career because it's never been about you. It's all been about snowboarding, and you just have happened to do really well. So thank you for your time, dude.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the interest, and hopefully I can do some more stuff over the next few years, and we'll catch back up and go through that.
So that was time with Danny Davis, and what a cool guy he seems to be. No real ego, and just a down-to-earth dude who I'm sure would be an awesome person to call part of your crew, as I'm sure there's not that many dull moments in that dude's life. And this is another part where it would be great to have a co-host. They could bring up something that I didn't talk about in the podcast, or something that Danny mentioned that they wanted to elaborate on. We could have a conversation about that. That could be a different take on these podcasts, but who knows? I'm going to leave it up to you, and maybe I won't leave it up to you. Maybe I will actually just make a call on it in the next few weeks. Whatever. That's the show for this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. If you have an iPhone, here's what you need to do. First, tap the podcast icon on your iPhone. Second, search for the Powell Movement. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Fifth, tap 5 stars and you're done. It's that easy. If you like, you can also write a review afterwards. It is greatly appreciated by me. What is also appreciated are my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Cole Headwear, and Glade Optics. Have a great week, everyone.